Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Christopher Plota, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you, Yuri. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure, of course. It's my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to chat with me.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, how do you describe yourself and what you do?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. I'm an artist, and let's see, photographer, artist. I'm now a tech entrepreneur, and living in this world of motion art, this new world of motion art that's coming up right now that we're having a total blast with. Mm-hmm. But I'm a father of three, and photography and the photography industry is kind of all I've known throughout my whole career. I started when I was quite young.
Mm-hmm. So. Oh, that's great. So, okay, yeah. So since you mentioned photography and it is a big part of your resume, so I guess what got you started into or interested in photography, and were there any experiences you had early on in your life that may have planted the seed for that, or how did that happen?
Yeah, good question. I started when I was 13 years old. There's a photography class in high school that I started with. And just ever since I picked up the camera, I just absolutely loved it. And then when I was 16, I won I won some kind of state award at I grew up in Florida, so I won a big competition for a state award for a newspaper and yearbook conference that they had. So I just kind of always had a knack for it. I never really was good at school. It was like one of those things like, hey, I'm really good at photography and I really love it, but I'm barely making it through school. I was not a scholastic child, more of the creative type for sure.
Sure.
That's how I started.
Okay, well, great. And so you went and you studied photography a bit in college. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. I went for about a year and a half. But mostly did a lot of surfing and used my high school negatives. I was like, I kind of already knew so much. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just rehashing this stuff. Yeah. So, and started shooting on the side for money and, it's doing portraits and that sort of thing and shooting fashion from the beginning, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So your photography career, if people were to create a movie and there was like a famous photographer in that movie, your credits would be like the credits of that famous photographer. It is, it's like the architect of the 90s in the rom-coms. So how there's a big question behind this, but so you got started early on in photography, but how were you able to build your career going from, a photography student in Florida to, working with some big names in fashion and advertising and building up this amazing portfolio?
Well, just kind of, building my portfolio from a young age. Like I said, this is all I've really done for the most part up till now, up till the past couple of years. And I don't know. It's a great question. It's just kind of gradual. It's like all of a sudden I'm shooting, actually, you know what? I shot Cindy Crawford back in the day, like very early on. I think I was like 21 years old and I had this opportunity to shoot Cindy Crawford. And so you just kind of you just keep going at it and all of a sudden you get these kind of lucky little hits that come in that advance your career. And I talk a lot about relationships and building relationships, with people within whatever industry you're in, was always very helpful. And because for me, it's like, your work, of course, has to be really good, but your relationship skills, for me was very important. And I was good at building relationships that way.
Oh, sure. So what would you say are some of the key relationships? Is it like, where did you have good relationships with, the managers of the various models? Was it with the magazines? Was it a combination of all of those, or how did your relationships build to help your career?
From the very beginning, I started with the modeling agencies. Because in the modeling agencies, initially, I was a fashion photographer for a long time. I needed access to the models to shoot, to build my book portfolio up. Mm-hmm. So I started, befriending the agents at the modeling agencies, and I would go visit all the modeling agencies and actually just hang out and do work around the office. I would just, there's one story that I have that I was, standing in an office, and I'm just kind of like, you wait like for, a week to get in for this meeting to show your portfolio. And so I'm going to, make the best of it as I can. So I'm in this office. The agents are all on the phone. They're just slam packed. They're trying to get a meeting in with me, and the phones are blowing up. So I noticed that they were unorganized in the way that their portfolios, back in the day we had, press books with the portfolios, printed portfolios, and they're all out of order. And they kept like looking for the girls to send the book out. And I was like, hey, wouldn't it be best if they were in alphabetical order so you guys could find them? They're like, yeah, it's a great idea. Shut up, kid. I'm on the phone. So I'm like, okay. So I just went over and I started alphabetically putting the portfolios in order and getting it set up. And they're kind of like raising eyebrows like, hey, we like this guy. What's going on over here? This is making things easier for us. And then a call came in for one of the agents, and she's like, hey, aren't you a photographer, right? I said, yeah. She's like, are you available to do a shoot tomorrow? And they're like, I've got a girl who needs a test. I'm like, yes, I'm available. Let's do this. So it's like that. It's things like that, that you just, you build the relationships. A lot of times some people say, oh, I got to charge for everything you do and whatever. But, it's like go in and kind of, make yourself known. And then when you get the opportunity, show them what you got,
Yeah. So is there in the work that you've done, has there been a favorite shoot that you've had or a favorite magazine to work with?
Oh my gosh, not really. As weird as that may sound. No, it's just all an amazing blur. Mm-hmm. Like all of it together combined is unbelievable. It's just my camera has gotten me to travel around the world. I've shot everybody, a lot of celebrities, not everybody, of course, but I've shot a lot of celebrities. And I've just had a very kind of blessed life so far.
Sure. Okay. In 2013, you did a TEDx talk, about the future of photography. How did that happen?
My PR agent, had this opportunity for me to do a TED Talks, and of course I was like, yeah, let's do this, and you're supposed to practice for like a month up until the time that you do your talk. Mm-hmm. And I was literally booked, I think every single day, including like the day before I talked. And so I was like basically kind of winging it somewhat because I knew I kind of know what I'm going to say, but they were very specific about learning the script. So then I just, the last minute I kind of crammed and I talked about what's going on with future photography within photogrammetry. That was what that talk was about, is how when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a sculptor. And I didn't really have the access, and I didn't really end up, of course, being a sculptor. But what's interesting is through my photography and photogrammetry, I was shooting a lot of 3D. I've got a very big 3D rig. I could actually now with my camera through photography shoot a subject and then 3D print them as a sculpture. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of interesting. Like that's the basis of that TED Talks is how you put a postulate out there, you put an idea that you have, and it doesn't always come back today or tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It comes back when it's meant to come back. And that was just one of those things where I was thinking, wow, it's pretty interesting how that kind of came about.
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of amazing how kind of everything kind of worked out on that one. And especially now, so I know that was 2013 and, now especially I work in a facility that, allows other companies to kind of use industrial equipment. And one of those companies can take a 3D image and then print it on a flat piece of paper so that it looks like a three-dimensional hologram. And it's like the next big thing with that. And they also do large 3D printed all kinds of things. So I'm curious then. So that was 2013 when you spoke about that. What would you say is the future of photography now, 5 years later?
Real time is motion art hands down, because what's going on with VR, it's still a little ways out. So what we did is I have actually a 132-page keynote on the future of photography with all aspects, with it being motorized, like everything imaginable as far as what you could think what could happen. And motion art, which is now what we've created with Plotagraph, the Plotagraph app under Plotaverse, is very useful now. We're able to actually use it for social media, and we're now one of Facebook's top 5 recommended photo apps. Because what's happening in the photography world is all of our budgets as commercial photographers are moving to video. There's a lot of, video gets more attention than stills, especially with the younger generations. So I'm like, okay, how can we help photographers monetize their business and compete in the video world? So my partner and I, Sasha and I, created Plotagraph initially. And we launched in the App Store about a year ago. Apple featured us about a year ago, and we shot up to #1 in the photo video section of the App Store. And so now it's funny because I see the future's happening right now, but now it's my job to talk about it, to say, hey, by the way, listen, look at what's happening over here, and look at how both yourself or your customers or your clients can get more engagement and very cost effectively by animating your still photos, whether it's through Plotagraphs, cinemagraphs, 3D, whatever it might be. This looping platform, these loops now that can now be looped in MP4s, which it used to have to be a GIF back in the day, and it still can be a GIF, of course, but GIFs are kind of going away because now, we have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Everybody's looping videos now if they're under a certain amount of seconds, which creates this whole entire world that never existed. Like even a couple years ago, it's such brand new technology. It's happening now, and I just see this bursting really big in the next year or two. So that's what's happening here. And then VR, of course, is still, we've got photogrammetry and these other things that you're talking about that are really cool. But for me to help photographers and to help artists right now, this is the most relevant thing that's happening.
Sure. So let's talk about your jump into the tech world, because there are a lot of individuals who think of themselves only as one thing. So only a photographer, or only a painter, or sculptor, an artist, and they don't see themselves also as jumping in and becoming an entrepreneur. So what made you want to get involved and create this tech app and this tech company beyond what you were working on at the time?
I had a friend who I shared with him my keynote of the future of photography, and he's kind of a very famous guy, created a company that we all know and love, and he wanted to back me to go into this, into the kind of the photogrammetry sort of realm, like in the higher end stuff. So I put my cameras down and I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate to, this is kind of like a dream come true. This is an amazing opportunity. So we went in and we got some bids from some engineers, from coders in Bulgaria, and we got all the bids. And then at the last minute, I kind of threw this thing on there called Plotagraph. It wasn't what we were going to do. It was just kind of what we were kind of gearing up for, with this other stuff. And I was kind of curious to see what the bid would be. So we get the bids back, and they were like 1.5 million, for the code and all these things that we were going to do. Yeah. And then he actually backed out on me several months into it. And Sasha and I are like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Right? Because we were like, okay, I haven't really called any clients recently because I'm going full steam ahead here. Well, we got the bid back, and the lowest thing on the totem pole was Plotagraph, the lowest bid. And I was like, okay, so if I sell all of my gear, I've got some usage coming in from MGM, I've got all this stuff going on, we can make this Plotagraph thing happen. Yeah. So Sasha and I, so that's what we did. And so we went for it and we started coding it. And then the more we kept going with it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so relevant for now. And I've just become so passionate about it. I've been animating images for a long, long time, for years and years, but it took like very hefty,